My name is Benton Stokes. I'm a former fundamentalist, post-evangelical worship leader, and songwriter. I enjoy wry Manhattans, roller coasters, and road trips, just not all at the same time.
I'm Elane O'Rourke, and I'm a teacher, an author, and a spiritual coach. I was a philosophy professor and a liberal pastor in a couple of former lives, and these days I love aha moments and not-so-dry martinis.
We have conversations about life and God with a queer perspective, over cocktails, like you. This is Cocktail Theology. So today we are enjoying the Chicago cocktail.
Are we enjoying it? Do we know
Well, I don't
that?
know. I haven't tried it yet.
Okay.
We're going to see if we enjoy it.
Okay.
Let's take a sip.
I thought maybe the royal we were enjoying it and you were inviting we to enjoy it. It's like a punchy French 75.
It kind of is, really.
This could do me some damage. So what's in this?
It's tasty. Okay, so it's cognac,
Okay.
triple sec,
Okay.
Angostura bitters,
Okay.
and champagne.
We like all those things.
And it has a sugar rim.
I can see the sugar rim. Mm-hmm. It's green. Mm-hmm. So what? All the questions I have right now. So why are we drinking the Chicago cocktail?
So we are drinking the Chicago cocktail in honor of Pope Leo.
Ah, the new Pope Leo.
The new Pope Leo.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. How many Pope Leos have there been? A few, right?
Uh-huh.
He's like the 6th or 7th?
I don't know. I'd have to look. I don't keep track.
I don't know. We're talking about popes today. What is the significance of a pope? So I, of course, grew up Protestant, grew up evangelical, fundamentalist.
Yeah. Low church Protestant.
Tiny low church sect, Church of the Nazarene. And, the Pope was not someone that I really knew very much about. He seemed like a very mysterious figure in the Catholic Church, which I knew zero about.
Now, does this go back to our Catholics, Christian, the Protestant Catholic thing problem? Or is it just that it was just alien?
It was just alien.
Okay.
I don't remember there ever being anybody just coming out and saying Catholics weren't Christians in my church.
Okay.
I just don't remember there being any conversation about Catholics. And I actually didn't have any Catholic friends until I got into high school.
Okay.
So the whole thing was just kind of over there, and I didn't know what it was. And Nashville is not exactly a hub of Catholicism.
Sure.
It is, however, a hub of evangelicalism. So, most of my friends went to evangelical churches like me, and so the Pope wasn't somebody that I really encountered very much. Mm-hmm. However, I think with the coming of a new Pope, might be a good time for us to talk about why the Pope is important.
Okay.
What is the impact that the Pope has on us when we aren't Catholic?
Okay. All right. I have lots of thoughts about that.
Well, regale us with all the thoughts.
regale. Well, I think that the concern over who will become Pope in the broader conversation, at least in the United States, says that the Pope matters in some way.
Yeah, I think so too.
So that idea that, an old Catholic white guy who is probably not really celibate and not really straight, whatever it is that people say about whatever that is they say things about,
right,
is kind of irrelevant. Like you can dismiss the idea of the leader of the Catholic Church as irrelevant as much as you want, but the fact that everybody actually waits to find out who will be Pope and is concerned that it will go one direction or another says that the Pope matters.
Yes.
So I just want to lift that up because I can hear people going, oh, who cares about the Pope? Well, you need to care about the Pope, right?
Yeah.
And you need to care about the Pope because the Pope actually has a lot of influence on global policy.
Yes, he does. Because the Pope can literally insert himself into the conversation. Mm-hmm. So if something's going on that the Pope doesn't understand, he can pose questions. If something's going on that he doesn't approve of, he can state that disapproval. If there's something that he wants to endorse, he can jump in and endorse it. Mm-hmm. And that makes him an incredibly powerful person and incredibly influential. He can meet with world leaders and tell them what he thinks, and people listen. I mean, world leaders pay attention.
Right.
The fact that he has such an outsized sway as one person who doesn't represent a government exactly, that's huge and that's important.
Right. To put that in sort of 21st century terms, he's like the ultimate influencer, right?
He really is.
Okay, so I'm thinking about a couple different things about this. So first of all, he is the head of state.
Yes.
Now, he's the head of state of a very, very, very tiny, I don't even know what they are, what Vatican City is. It's not a country. I don't know what the actual term is for it, but he is the head of state.
He is the head of the Vatican,
City,
yes.
of the Vatican.
Right.
But the other piece of this that's really important to remember is that even if in the United States we don't feel like Catholicism is a big deal, which it is, but even if we don't think it is, it's huge in Asia and Africa.
Yes.
That matters. He's one of the very few influencers, if you will, who has influence across continents in a very deep way.
Yes.
In a way that affects people's politics, affects people's social lives, affects their standing in their churches, affects their standing in their society, affects whether they can marry, have children, all of those things. He has a tremendous amount of influence over that.
Wow. Yeah.
Right? On a global scale. So if you think about it that way, that's a whole different way of thinking about this guy who runs a church.
That's true.
Right? So there's that. I think another piece about this that we should remember is that, the Pope, the papacy is what we call it, the various peoples over time, the papacy. The papacy began while Paul was still alive.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay? And I really want, especially our Protestant friends, to hang on to that for a second. This institution of the papacy, of somebody being the spokesperson for Christianity, and then Christendom, and then Christianity, started when the whole darn thing started.
That's wild, yeah.
Okay? And so the history of the papacy is that Peter touched the next person who touched the next person who touched the next person who became a pope who became a, right? And so there's this idea of an unbroken line from Peter to Pope Leo.
Right.
Now, there are other unbroken lines as well. So, for example, I believe in the apostolic touch. I believe that it matters that I was ordained by somebody who was ordained by somebody who was ordained by, all the way back. It wasn't like somebody declared themselves a preacher and then ordained somebody else.
Right.
And for me, that matters.
Yeah.
So this is a line that goes all the way back.
Wow.
Right? It's also a line that has been intimately connected with the history of the globe since then. So one of the great schisms that happened, well, actually two great schisms that happened in the early history of the church, so in around the 6th century and then around the 11th century, were divisions that then threw the papacy into kind of a weird turmoil, not because the papacy was discounted, but because when the church did this radical split, it was like, okay, now what?
Yeah.
Right? It's really intimately tied to our history globally and not just in the West.
Wow.
So the fact of the election of a particular pope and what that means says a lot about who we are as a globe and what the Catholic Church and the world as it is influenced by the Catholic Church and influences the Catholic Church thinks is the right way to go.
Wow, yeah, that's a cool way to think about that. Yeah.
So it's really an important bellwether, I guess, or canary, or whatever. Pick your. I don't know these metaphors well enough to do this, but it's that, right? So it matters a lot. It matters a lot.
It does matter a lot. For people who are outside the church, for secularists, for atheists, for people who aren't Christians, like religious folks of other stripes, I think what the Pope says is taken often as representative of what Christians think or Christians believe.
There's definitely that.
And I think that's another reason why, as Protestants, it's important that we pay attention to what the Pope is saying, because what he is saying is he's speaking, first of all, as Christ's representative on earth.
Yep.
But he's speaking for Christians or Christianity.
Yes, that's
to folks that aren't Christians.
Yep.
There's not a singular Protestant figure.
Which is good, given the way that Protestants think about religion. If there were a singular Protestant figure, we would be in trouble.
Yes, we would. We would.
Right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there have been.
Yeah, there have been.
Right? I mean, over the years, the cult of personality, rather than the repetition of tradition, has been what has created the Protestant leader.
Right.
The better you were on camera, the more people you could get into your place, then you represented Christianity, right?
Right.
So we've got a president right now who in some ways claims to represent Christianity.
Yeah.
That's problematic.
Yes, it is.
I'd much rather have a pope, honestly,
Yes.
than a popularity contest.
We know how the Pope is chosen through the conclave, but as Christians, we can also say that this is a spirit-directed process.
That's right.
You know, and like you said, like what's going on with the church and what's going on with culture, they influence one another.
Yes, they do.
And so whoever the cardinals choose is influenced by this tug of war, this give and take between church and culture.
That's right.
And they're taking the pulse of what's going on in the church, what's going on in culture, and they're praying.
Yep.
And they're saying, inform us, tell us.
Yep.
And so the person that comes out of that process then is trusted because there was a process. And as they would see it, and as I see it too, a very God-directed process.
I think even if one is completely cynical about how the conclave goes, the fact that the Pope has to satisfy a global audience to some degree or another matters.
Yeah.
And the fact that, I mean, there's this doctrine of papal infallibility, which is actually a pretty recent doctrine. Mm-hmm. But the idea is that what the Pope says about matters of the church are infallible.
Okay.
Okay. The Pope can't make a mistake.
Yeah.
That means that popes have to very carefully consider what they are saying against what has been said in the past. It's actually a lot like the Supreme Court. It's a weird way to think about it.
Oh, yeah, I see that.
But if you think about it as precedent,
yes,
the Supreme Court almost never says, wow, that Supreme Court 80 years ago was just dead wrong. Mm-hmm. They kind of wiggle.
Yes.
If you think about the election of the Pope as a gathering of global leaders of communities that are anywhere from 2 people to 2 million people.
Yes.
Trying to figure out who can lead them and guide them and speak for them as well as possible in this season. Mm-hmm. That's not a bad way of thinking about how to choose a leader.
It's not.
I think the other piece that is important or should be important to us as people of Christian faith who identify as queer is the challenge that any leadership of a large institution of any kind faces when they're trying to navigate how to both be prophetic and satisfy a global view.
Right.
I was having a conversation the other day, and I don't remember who it was, about the fact that the westernization of Africa, of Asia, of Central and South America and so forth, has created this, and particularly actually of what we would call the Arab areas. It's not a great way to put it, but that the problem of the westernization of that means that people who don't want to become America will then often especially value their traditions, whether those traditions are something they would value if they weren't afraid of becoming westernized.
Ah, right.
Right? And actually, this actually goes back to Paul. Oh my gosh, who knew? So when Paul says in the letter to the Corinthians, women shouldn't speak, he's not saying women shouldn't speak. He's saying, you're in a really screwed up position right now.
Yeah.
Keep your women quiet.
Yeah.
Because you've got to face all this other stuff outward.
Right.
Right?
Right.
It's the same kind of problem we see in various places around the world. So there was some concern that an African cardinal would be elected pope because the African churches, or the African church, has its own figurings out it has to do that are quite different than the figurings out of Europe, the figurings out of Australia, and so forth. And it's about that whole, how do they resist westernization in certain ways, accept westernization in other ways, maintain their own culture. I'm talking as if Africa is one place. It's not, but for the moment, how do they do that, right? And as a result, it's a tricky place to be in that, what's called the papal see, S-E-E, to be in that position, because you're aware that you're running this extremely large, extremely culturally diverse organization.
Yeah.
That has interests of its own.
Yeah.
When I was in high school, someone asked me if I wanted to be president, and I was like, oh my God, too much authority, not enough power, right?
Right.
Like if I could be God, okay, but I feel the same way about Pope. Like, such a hard job.
Yes.
Such a hard job. Yeek. Like being the moral authority and running a large institution. Whew.
Right.
Takes a better man than I am, I'll tell you that.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's tricky, and I think we should care about it. And so if we look at like Benedict, who was Francis's predecessor, for folks who don't know, there's this thing that was called Vatican II. And it was a meeting of cardinals and representatives over a period of time where they were trying to figure out what to do with modernity, basically.
Okay.
And what came out of Vatican II was things like, instead of the priest facing the altar and with his back to the people, the priest turned to face the people during the Eucharist. That was major.
Wow.
Because if you think about the role of a priest, not a prophet, not a pastor, the role of a priest, the priest is offering something to God.
Right.
You face God. You don't face the people.
Yeah.
So that idea of turning to face the people was huge. It was a big shift in theology and in culture.
Sure.
Changing from speaking in Latin to speaking in the native language of each, right? The Pentecost view. Big change, because Latin was forever, right?
Yes.
So if you think about those kinds of massive changes, like the ones that happened with Vatican II, and then coming up into Benedict, who was trying to reclaim, like, God love him, trying to reclaim the stuff that was conservative before that, while also not losing it's a heck of a job.
Yeah. Now, I know that Pope Francis was seen as not exactly conservative.
Correct.
With at least among Catholics.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. He was seen as quite liberal among Catholics.
And
worldwide.
It seems like his positions evolved a bit. When you talk about papal infallibility, and the Pope changes his mind, what does that mean?
Well, it means that in the matters that affect the church, if the Pope, after careful prayer and thought, comes up with a statement about the way the church should run, he is de facto not wrong.
Wow. So what if Pope Leo then reverses something that Pope Francis said?
Reverses is a really tough one, right? Because one of the things the popes, at least in semi-modern to modern times, have done really well is understand, much like the Supreme Court, that there's precedent, that there's reason. And to be completely fair, I believe that most of the people who ascend the see have a faithful relationship with God, or try to.
Right.
And understand that their predecessors had a faithful relationship with God. And God speaks to us differently, and we interpret the world differently. It isn't like God said, Eden forever. Woohoo!
Right.
God shifted over time. The popes understand that too. So they're trying to maintain the tradition and the continuity while also acknowledging that they may hear from God differently than their predecessor did.
Yeah.
A couple more things. I think that those of us who tend to think that Asian religion is better and sweeter and kinder and all of those things, which is what it is, the amount of grace that we would grant the Dalai Lama, we should grant the Pope. Dalai Lama has a huge privilege in the West of being just able to be beneficent and speak out for Tibet, but not really have to challenge much of anything if he doesn't want to. The Pope is in the position of always having to figure that one out.
Right.
So we grant the Pope at least as much grace, right?
Yeah.
And that's because we believe that God speaks to people where they are, as they are, as best that they can hear.
Yes.
Whether it's the Dalai Lama or whether it's Pope Leo.
Yeah.
Right? So I think it's important to grant all of that grace.
Yes.
And to trust that whether I like a particular pope's policies or not, they've spent a lot of years just trying to listen for God, run churches, be in community with a global community.
Yeah.
Like they've been working at this a very long time.
Right.
I give them some credit for that.
Yeah. Going back to our last episode where we talked about wonder and the absence of wonder, I think accepting the Pope as someone who is divinely led,
Yes.
requires a certain amount of wonder on our part.
Yes.
Especially if we aren't Catholic. Because we aren't just falling in line because that's what you do.
Right. Which most Catholics don't do. I mean, let's be fair.
Sure. Right.
Yeah.
But it requires us to accept that the Holy Spirit moves in new and different ways that we don't always understand through people that we don't always understand or even agree with.
That's right.
And so as Pope Leo emerges, the first American Pope from Chicago, I think it behooves us to listen.
Yeah.
Listeners, what do you think? We always love hearing from you. If we have some Catholic listeners, and I sincerely hope we do.
We do.
We would love to hear from you.
Yes, please.
Cocktailtheology.com is where we are. What do you think of Pope Leo so far? Honestly, it's interesting because, there was some concern from those of us that are a bit more progressive that because of the conservative turn that's taken in politics around the world, that this Pope would also be of that persuasion.
Yeah, his positions have not always been what progressives would love to be the positions of everybody in the world.
Sure.
So,
Well, listeners, let us know what you think about all that. We are at cocktailtheology.com. We love getting ideas for episodes and for cocktails. This Chicago cocktail is yummy and mine's almost gone. Wow.
mine is gone.
Till next time, friends.
Bye.
Bye.
Funny how the view can change, how life just seems to rearrange itself. No matter what it was, I don't know how it goes, but look, moving on feels pretty good. Moving on feels pretty good.
If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a like and hit subscribe wherever you're listening right now. We welcome your comments, questions, and ideas for conversations and for cocktails. Please get in touch with us at our website, cocktailtheology.com. Cocktail Theology is a production of SFS. Our theme song is Moving On Feels Pretty Good, recorded by yours truly, Benton Stokes. You can find my music wherever you stream your favorite artists. Join us next Thursday for another new episode.